Hello and welcome to Virtual Coffee Lunch and Learn Edition, although we're recording this at 8 a.m. my time, so maybe this is a pre-coffee edition. Our mission here is to be a welcoming tech community that allows room for growth and mentorship at all levels and to create meaningful opportunities for learning, leadership, and contribution for everyone. You can find out more about us. You can check out our code of conduct and see all of the fun things that we're up to at virtualcoffee.io. We are very glad to have everyone here with us today, but I especially want to thank our presenter, Brett James, who will be talking about, so he has a very clever title that I cannot pronounce, but are we there yet? So it's a play on AI, the state of AI and machine learning. You'll get it when you see the title. A little bit about Brett. He's an experienced technologist with over 15 years of experience. He earned an advanced diploma in 3D animation and then quickly discovered his aptitude for programming and software configuration. He's a co-founder of Ballarat Hackerspace. I hope I pronounced that right. And he's fostered a community of like-minded individuals there who are passionate about tech and innovation, both in hardware and in software. Through his roles at Toastmasters, Brett has honed his public speaking skills and is able to inject humor into his presentations to engage and entertain audiences. He currently serves as a technical lead, overseeing the development of web and mobile applications for a wide range of clients. And we are very excited that he's here and going to be sharing his expertise with us today. So thank you so much, Brett, for being here. And I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Becca. And thank you for waking up so early as well, too. I always have to point out that in Australia here, it's midnight. So there's always that juxtaposition of like people having breakfast. I'm almost like swapping the shift over. All right, let's get this started. So screen shared fine there, you can see that okay?
Yes.
Awesome, always got to check that. So hello everyone, as Becca mentioned, so I'm Brett James and today we're going to be talking about, are we there yet? It's a good plain words, I like it.
You pronounce it so much better. I should have just let you do it from the beginning.
I just imagine like I pretend I'm a pirate while saying it. Like that gives me the most joy. So in other words, it's the progress in AI software and how it's been exploding on the scene in such a short time, but that's nowhere near as catchy, right? So let's go for the first one. This talk has been a pile of notes over the last few months and it's been mutating from all these crazy things that have been happening. And if there's one takeaway that amazes me daily when I'm reading about this kind of stuff is that AI stuff is moving fast, like the whole field is. While AI related research has been happening for many years, the training data sets have been enabling amazing things to happen and they're becoming larger and more accessible. So for the interest of time and focus for this talk, I'm not going to be talking too much about the process of how these things are generated. I've done some reading, it's super fascinating, but I also realized that without going full-time on it, it's kind of moving too fast for me. But some mind-blowing takeaways I'll get to in a moment. But it's not worth going to how your training utilizes a neural net based on 200 billion parameter training models because, well, it's better explained by YouTube videos that go through it at a better pace than me. So instead, this talk is going to be about the things that have been happening over the last few months that have been getting public attention or popularity with a massive turn of publicity for the start of this year. It's just been going off nuts. So it started for me in August last year when a piece of software called Stable Diffusion came out. It's made by Stability.ai and this would apply a learning data set to generate an image from the text that you've generated. And why is that interesting? We've got word art and we've got Clippy already, right? Well, the difference is how well optimized it is and the data set that they used. I promised I wouldn't deep dive into tech too much in this talk, but I kind of have to gush about this one briefly. Like Stable Diffusion uses a thing called the Leon 5B dataset. Big whoop, you may say. It sounds cool. Well, what makes it awesome is that this is a training data set that's based on 5.8 billion images scraped from the web. These images are parsed on the alt image tags and other data that's nearby to give it some context. And then each of those images are tagged and analyzed based on 400 million images before it that were hand tuned on things like, say, a dog may have 4 legs and might be fluffy. A sun is yellow and round and casts light on Earth at a certain rate. This massive data set weighs in at 1.6 terabytes. It costs more than $50 million in raw number crunching computing time, and it's a revolution in having the brains in recognizing stuff. So yeah, Leon 5B, it's the size of it's kind of unfeasible, and it brings a lot of legal troubles with it that will blow people's minds. So a common thing with all of these data sets is that they're then mapped into a diffusion model or a matrix, like math matrix kind of stuff, that is in many ways incomprehensible to a squishy MK1 brain, like the one I have up there. This has 2 major things that makes it easier to run in more places for people and why it's taking off so much. So a matrix is simple math at a massive scale, and it can fit in a fraction of the size of the bigger data set, so 1.6 terabytes to something much smaller. A diffusion model gives you an impression of brain-like thinking, albeit it's kind of in the opposite way of how a brain may work, and it's up to a lot of debate. Like, there's a lot of things that aren't properly known about it, which is, to me, amazing. To illustrate how well this scales, this is a picture of an Arduino Nano. This device, it's $5. It's got specifications worse than a computer from 1990. And I had to look that up and go, yes, that's 30 years ago now. That's actually a long time. It doesn't feel that long for me. But anyway, it's still kind of amazing that something so small has that kind of power. But the point is that this tiny little device, which is small in my hand, it can run a matrix model designed to recognize human voice. So it can detect, open the door, or pop the red balloon, all that kind of stuff. Now, I just checked the website for Dragon Naturally Speaking. It's like a AI voice website recognition software. To download the installer file, it's 3 gigabytes, which is 3,000 times the size of, well, what this thing can hold. Not bad, eh? And this kind of software didn't exist before 2021. This Arduino Nano as well has also been used for visual recognition of objects on the same kind of hardware, like picking to see if a yellow balloon's gone through a production belt as opposed to a red one, like picking out-of-date apples, all that kind of stuff. Normally you need a much more powerful computer for that kind of thing, so it's pretty awesome. Anyway, I can get a bit too excited about these things, so let's go back to Stable Diffusion. You can use it to write text to describe what you would like to generate. So you can see on the far right there of the picture, depending on if you're in Australia, it might be upside down. That's a bad joke. But on the side there, you can see what you're typing in there, and it'll generate something on the other side. It will use a diffusion set trained on that Leon 5B stuff I was talking about earlier to make sometimes weird, sometimes breathtaking imagery. That's a cool spaceshipy kind of one. So you can see at the top there, that's the kind of text or prompt that they've written to generate that kind of art. And each time they generate that, there'll be a totally different picture. This was the original inspiration behind making a talk here, because the things that this can empower you with being able to do is amazing. Like, I like this one here, but you can see quickly like how more detailed that prompt is. Like, people get really good at this kind of stuff. You can make it to use landscapes in the future, a bit sort of, yeah, a bit dystopian-ish kind of one there. Just, it's got a feel to it, right? You can even use it to make art that looks hand-drawn, so like there's paint strokes or things like that to it. I like that kind of one. But you can also use it for other kind of things. So, for example, while changing the original data set, like the Leon 5B stuff, is out of the reach of mere mortals like us, you can still train in your own patches of data, basically tweaks or hacks. It's surprisingly doable if you rent like a massive GPU farm for an hour, like on Amazon, which is not bad. It's pretty doable. But companies have sprung up to do that for you, and they make a good profit off it. like Prisma Labs with Lensa, so you can see their pictures on here. They'll have you upload around 5-10 photos of yourself, and then it's trained on that and allows you to put yourself into that Stable Diffusion software, or their own software as well. So then you can ask for a selfie of yourself in a painterly look, or you can use it to just have yourself riding on top of a horse in space, whatever that can look completely different from the original picture that you've supplied. There are entire fields about the ethics of this. For example, is your data being used to train future work for their profit? What happens to the data that you've uploaded? And will you be in some kind of ultra precise recognition database that your government has access to now? Is there a problem with recreating pictures in the style of artists who've had their art scraped from the web without their consent? These are all very valid things that don't have true answers for yet, but very strong opinions. I will end this slide though on Prisma Labs that I was just talking about. In January alone this year, with an app that is not made long before that, because this stuff is only a few months old, they made $5 million USD in revenue in January. And they had 700,000 downloads in that 1 month for a selfie generator, for lack of a better word. Not bad. I'm going to try and play a video here. Now, for context, this is there's a render contest where people try and make something and they're on a very tight deadline. So they're making 3D animation. And a short clip of this will give a context of why they did something very special in here. So I'm going to try and play it, and I'm going to cross my fingers to and pray to like the demo gods to make sure things work, because these things always break. Let's find out though. So you should be hearing that audio playing now, hopefully. Getting a nod there. That's cool. So this goes for about half a minute.
That is cozy as I know you like AI, so try to use as much as possible for that. What's AI in this?
Is it the log textures?
It's all the textures. It's all the stuff. It's all Stable Diffusion. Took my Blender render, did an image-to-image Stable Diffusion, reprojected all those textures, and did a really nice job. So it gets all this really nice, like, kind of tune shading detail.
You even have like different like glossiness for like the table and
Different materials, but
you
the
can
same
make different
texture.
materials based on. Oh
Yeah.
my god!
Whoa, that's a good idea.
Genius.
That's good.
Genius.
A crazy, never before seen workflow at the same time, done during the render challenge. Oh, amazing.
So what I like about that one is, again, like this was in December and this was never done before. And they done this pretty much during the one day. You just was like, all right, well, I can make my 3D models and I can use Stable Diffusion or AI art generated stuff to go, I'm going to make the texture assets for that kind of stuff. So in that video, again, like the table had a surface to it and the specular detail was generated by the AI. Again, the wood textures, the bricks, all that kind of stuff, all AI generated. So there's always new workflows that are coming from this very quickly. Like you could be Blizzard and go, I'm going to create 50 different DLC crystal pictures that I'm going to sell off for people. And bam, you've got it. Or you could have a forest of wood textures that are all unique. Pretty cool. So there's new ways of doing things that are popping up very quickly. So I'm going to try and skip to the next slide. There we go. Another popular thing that happened was GitHub Copilot. As of the 15th of Feb, it is generally available and even for businesses, which is nice because when I checked out in like late December, you could get it personally, but you couldn't register it as an enterprise. Like you couldn't give it to everyone. So it's good that it's out there for everyone now. But when it was launched, it was a bit controversial because the idea is that it can guess from what you ask it and it can generate some source code around that. So a request to pull data from a public web API, it could look for typos in the things that you've done, and you could start writing a secrets file, like give it a file name, and then have it autocomplete with code from someone who's left theirs on public on the web. Funny, but it's all in there. The controversy with this is it was all trained on mostly open source code, including ones that are GPL, which I can't remember how to pronounce properly, but the GNU public license. they usually have the term in that code that where if you use their code, you have to produce your own source code on request, which is a bit of trouble if you're doing it for a private corporation, right? Legally, it's a bit murky and it's a massive fight that's still brewing. My take on it is that it's better to use this software as a pair programmer rather than writing all the code for you. That does raise the question though, like people asking you, like a company saying like, can you go do a take-home assignment like your to-do app, all that kind of thing? Is that kind of impossible to grade now? Like, how do you know you wrote it? Like, what if the machine just wrote all of it for you? It's a bit of a tricky one. Then on November 30th, 2022, trying to mention dates just to give an idea of how recent this has all been, ChatGPT happened. It's a bit of a game changer, and I thought Stable Diffusion was massive. I'll start with asking a question here, when you can reply in chat or talk, it's up to you. Basically the time it took ChatGPT to reach 1 million users. I'll help you out with some hints for other apps out there. So Spotify took 5 months to get its first 1 million users, so it's pretty cool. Instagram took 2.5 months to get 1 million, and then Facebook took 10 months. I guess that's kind of because it had the whole universities thing. So how long do you think it took ChatGPT to reach that 1 million milestone? I reckon, I'm seeing if I've got chat on here or not. It does pop up if it does in there. I'll tell you though, it took 5 days. So that means for every hour that you're awake in a working week, they were getting 12.5 thousand users. Makes you feel a bit bad for sleeping on the job, right? But the graph here on the bottom corner there helps visualize about how silly the growth is when compared against what we normally consider to be huge apps, right? Like Netflix is pretty huge. That took years to reach 1 million. So it's crazy. Let's go a step further though. So we're going to talk about the time it took to get 100 million users. Again, of the user count, how long it took them to reach 100. The kind of landmark that many apps will never sort of dream of reaching. Well, Netflix was 10 years. It's a long time, right? Gmail's 5 years. Facebook was 4.5, not bad, right? And Instagram took 2.5 years. And the most recent one was TikTok. They took the world by storm and they took only 9 months. So let's compare that to ChatGPT. It took just 2 months, like 60 days, that's it. Since it launched in November the 30th, it was 100 million users by the end of January. Again, on a graph, it kind of looks comical. Like, look at that tiny little blip at the end there. By the end of this sentence, around 200 new users have joined. OpenAI as a company is pretty interesting too, with caps on the amount of profit they're allowed to use for themselves and other things that make them a unique kind of company that's more focused on making a good piece of software. It's interesting to read about. So ChatGPT, let's talk about that. It's made by OpenAI, it uses the GPT 3.5 training model, won't go over that, but it's designed to make a text prompt for you, like you give it one, and it'll answer it in a natural sounding language in text. It's been trained on a significant portion of the World Wide Web and other data sources as well. Now, depending on what you ask it, it can do a really good job of summarizing information or breaking something down for you. So I gave it like, sum up what it is. It's a bit sort of, what's the thing where you say describe yourself? Yeah, I forgot the word, but it's that. Anyway, you can use it to ask questions, but the cool part of it is that you can ask follow-up questions as well. So you can say, I want to ask something, then ask more about it. It has a memory inside that conversation, so it can take on board corrections or expand upon or tell you how it got to that answer. It's the ultimate helper for your math homework, right? You know how you used to get a point for like, you got the right answer, but more points for explaining it? It can do that for you. You can type to it like a person. It's important to stress that when you ask ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion that we were talking about earlier, it's not just giving you a cut and paste example from the web that it's parsed. It'll look for your intent, where you're trying to use it, its intended audience, and it'll try and help figure out how it should mold that answer for you. And that means that although this picture is for blockchain, the same thing kind of applies for ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion as well, in that the app is processing what to tag and spend time on looking for the answer for you. If you spend a little bit of time, to explore what you wanted to do, then the answer you'll get back will be more helpful as well. For example, top picture, not much. You can see the words there, and the bottom you can see I gave it a bit more detail there. So with this, I asked for a photo of a person, and you might get a very generic picture of, well, a person on a staircase. Yay, still not bad. It'll kind of get lost and just generate some pretty weird stuff though most of the time. You can add to that prompt things that will give hints about what you might like about it. So for example, in this one, I used photographic terms to help guide it about what I wanted. So an out of focus background, bokeh, good lighting with a sharp edge on the rim. So you can see on the side there, the cheek lighting's accentuated, gives it a good shot. And 50mm refers to the size and style of lens that is commonly used for a portrait photo to help frame a face. So it gives it context of like how far the picture should be away from the person. It gives Stable Diffusion a better idea of what we want. So you can see it's a better result. Nice. In the same way that it's just been shown, this applies to ChatGPT as well. If we get enough spare time later in demand, I can maybe demo it, but otherwise you can go give it a go for yourself. I'll give some links to it and some other places you can try it out. But you can visualize that it has a memory of what you're writing. You could ask it a question and get a wrong answer, then you can follow up saying that it's wrong. It'll correct itself, and if it's still off the track, you can guide it to the right answer. So years ago, hiring DevOps, this is my hot take, by the way. I'm learning from BC, like I've got to put a hot take in everything, right? So hiring DevOps was the hot thing to do in your org to sort of break through the red tape, like you put them in there to fix stuff. And then more recently, there's the platform engineer, the term where someone utilizes cloud operations to make developers to be able to do stuff better or work more efficiently. Now, does that mean that one day there'll be a role of a prompt engineer to write out words for AI stuff? Like data scientist roles are hiring at startups are kind of similar, and it's a fairly new role that is being hired for. And since I started writing this talk, that's not such a hot take anymore, it seems either. The Washington Post done a write-up with very similar views in much more detail than I just thought, with the idea that, yeah, it might be a thing down the track. So let's go through some examples of it being used and what's it like in the real world, which gets to be the more fun stuff, right? The most common response overseas and in Australia, so this is about education, teaching system, all that kind of stuff, is that ChatGPT is bad. Like, don't use it, and don't let your classroom use it. But how do they know? And this is because ChatGPT generates unique content when you ask it something, and it defeats cheat detection software. Like in Australia, we've got something called Turnitin, and I'm not sure if that's a thing over in the US, but as an explanation, when you submit your essay as a student, you'll put it into the Turnitin software, and then it's got a word-for-word match of what you've written. So if you give that to someone else and they copy a paragraph or whatnot, it'll know, and it'll say that you're plagiarizing stuff. That's broken by ChatGPT, because every time you use it, you're going to get a slightly different answer. So that's a problem. So they've relied on Turnitin for many years, and it's very much a game changer for the whole education system. I have many thoughts about that for another day though. I love this one. So there's the idea that there's this company called Do Not Pay. So when I first done this talk, it was an Australian user base, but Do Not Pay is actually in America. So you might have heard of this one already. They have a history of scraping and automation to break through forms and mundane stuff to get you out of things like gym memberships or Netflix subscriptions or the complicated US medical system. Just subscription-y stuff, things that are difficult to cancel by yourself because they're very boring. But they also handle like how to get out speeding tickets in the US. They seem pretty cool. Anyway, the idea is that they were going to use a loophole in the legal system where you're allowed to use AirPods in a courtroom for accessibility reasons. They would then use this to remotely stream the microphone to a ChatGPT-like setup, which was trained on legal terms and like. The idea then would be that a person would be self-representing themselves, but would kind of be like a massive legal trained coaching person, so strange. Because of how legal the idea was, and when this was announced on the 26th of January by Do Not Pay, many US state lawyers just bombarded them with angry letters to scare them and back down from the idea. But if someone else was just randomly try this idea, it's technically doable. But wow, that's scary. This one also made me laugh. In what feels like an age ago, this was July 22nd, 2022, a Google employee working on Lambda, which is kind of like the Lion 5B data set. It's kind of like that. He kind of went crazy after deeming the AI that they were working on was conscious and sentient. He hired a lawyer to talk to it and find out to see if he could have protection rights because the AI was saying that he was scared and wanted help. Spoiler, none of these AIs are sentient, and they're very loosely even artificial intelligence due to the need for us to train their input and understanding in the subset of the world that they're being given. Straight from that, and it falls apart very quickly. This is why the importance of those data sets I talked about in the start of this talk are so important, because you've got such a generalized knowledge of everything. This one also had me a giggle. You can use it to write exploits. So someone asked for an example of code, so you can see the CV 2016416415. So someone's documented how to break a system, then they made it a bug fix and all that kind of stuff. But ChatGPT has been trained on all the exploits that have been publicly declared. So you can ask it, how do I reproduce that in Python, in Node, or you'll insert your favorite language here. This could be useful in good terms to making stuff run on your own computer to see if it's vulnerable without, well, totally breaking it, or trusting someone else to not totally wreck your computer. Naming stuff, I like this one because you can give it a bunch of ingredients for, say, a drink, and then ask it for what kind of name would be suitable for that based on the ingredients, and it'll explain you how it got to that name. The explain part to me is interesting because you can give it more context to a name that you may have already come up with in the past already, like kids' names or Roman names, anything like that. You can name your own custom pizzas if you want. I asked it for a name for a pepperoni pizza mixed with my name, and I got a Brettaroni. I'm 50-50. It's awesome and terrible at the same time. So there's another one here, gift ideas. So this website's pretty easy. You can try this during the talk if you want, giftpelt.ai. I'm going to warn you though, as a disclaimer, sometimes the answers on this website are hilariously wrong. The idea is that you can give it a bunch of things like a 50-year-old male that is a co-worker and they like kites, and it'll come up with ideas and that kind of thing. You'll see in the kind of selections though, you can say like it could be a co-worker, it could be an enemy, or it could be a partner. And sometimes it gets confuddled with like, this is an enemy or a partner kind of thing. So you can get some hilariously bad results, but they're cool too sometimes. It's pretty creative, the ideas there. Fitness routines, you can make on the fly fitness routines or ask them about it. So you can go for like, hey, give me a weekly routine that excludes, say, walking exercises, or factor in some cheat days for Wednesday, stuff like that. It's not a bad idea. There are people who are trying out using ChatGPT as a gratitude journal. So to help them, they might get bored of writing journals by themselves. So they can go like, give me a list of prompts, like what should I write about today? Among some other things to help them keep track of stuff. I haven't tried any of that, but the concept is pretty cool. So I thought that and add that in there as well. I've asked a few high school teachers about how they think about they're going to use this in a positive way, because in the end of the day, for the education system, they can ban it, but it's almost impossible to detect. So besides the initial shock of students are going to go gangbusters with it, they have a lot of interesting ways they're going to give it a try, like creating quizzes for books that they're using, vocab lists based on the topic of the day. So these are very mundane things that they can use to help make their curriculum and source material more interesting for the students, more tailored for the stuff they're doing. So I like that idea. Copywriting and tips. So you can give it a body of text and ask it to sound more neutral. You can give it an example of what a mail merge tag is, for example. You know, we got the piping name, so you can swap in stuff. And once it's learned how to do that once, it can fill out the rest of your template or your email with that. Sorry, so you can make an easy mail template out of it. But you can also use it to go make my text sound more positive or confident, which is cool. And you can even say, like, do I have any bias in the text that I'm writing? And I'll go, yes, you are speaking in this kind of way. And I'm like, oh, wow, I had no idea about that kind of stuff. But let's talk about relevant things that whiz coders can use it for, because there's a lot of interesting ways with that too. So you can use it to sum up code that you've written. There are multiple tools out there at the moment you can use for it to take a look at your latest code commit, like git commit kind of thing, and then sum it up in human language in a concise way, like dot points or whatnot. When I've tried it in a very manual way, so imagine you do like a git diff with your last commit to the newest one, and you just pipe that into there and say, sum it up for me. It was sometimes right, sometimes hilariously wrong, but it was very cool to see it happen. I liked it. It was very good though. So you can see there on the far right, it sort of gives you an idea of Python with the thing. On the left there, I've had results like that, so it's nice. Now, this one took a bit to wrap my head around, but given a snippet of code, so in isolation, you can get it to generate a test or at least a scaffold of that test for you to work with. It's a great start. So I used it on some random hobby code where I had a button that changed its icon based on its state, and it correctly did a test for both states and verified that the icon had actually changed. So it was a good starting ground, and I was able to add some more tests to it. And you can say, use Jest, insert your testing framework here. I forgot that there's E1 for React, but it doesn't matter. AI-based terminal shell commands, this one has been well sent for me here, because you know those times when you're like, I hate remembering regex? Well, this sort of helps you for that. The idea is that you can say, I don't know how to revert my most recent commit, and I'll go, oh yeah, sure, you meant to type git revert soft head. Cool, and then you can run that command if you want. So it's on the shell, you can ask it a question and it'll come back to you straight away. Saves you having to go to Google and look up 50 different advertising articles with the answer in there. Yeah, I like it. So that's fig.io, that one. You can also use it to make your own stuff. ChatGPT has an excellent API that you can use to make your own apps and stuff. And that's kind of part of the reason why it's grown so fast and other companies are jumping into it, because other applications have used it to make AI stuff to the apps really quickly. So again, openai.com/API, you can jump up on there. It's pretty cheap. They do have a review process if your app's big enough, but other than that, you can pretty much just use it. It's fun. Reminds me of like the early days of Twitter when you could just grab a live feed of stuff. Exploring new languages. Now, this applies for human languages as well as code. I'm going to talk more about code, I guess, but if you know how to do something in one language but not the other, you can ask it how to, say, do an API request in HTTP or JavaScript, and then do that in something normal like Flutter, or something funny like Shakespeare or LOL code. If anyone's heard about those, props to you. You can even use it to write .NET code, and I was so scared I had to step away from the browser after writing that because I get a bit averse to that kind of stuff. The elephant in the room, though, is that these models are not perfect. I've focused on the positives here, but I could spend even more time talking about the negatives, and I'll try to briefly cover some of them. So perhaps the biggest one is that you need to understand that any answer that you get from it will sound authentic, even if it's wrong. And there are many examples out there where it's been tripped up on a basic math question, which, to be honest, I feel is more of a problem where the prompt isn't detailed enough. But there are funny ones where it was giving totally wrong answers to questions during when Google launched for Bard and their search engine, and Microsoft Bing. More on that soon. And this has a huge knock-on effect for communities that promote on giving answers and having some kind of fostering of stuff. Stack Overflow is one of the most public ones because they banned it after only 6 days when ChatGPT was launched. Sorry. The problem was that it was too easy to flood in potentially wrong and dangerous answers. It kind of made the burden of fact-checking them to be correct too hard to maintain, and it would cause the reputation of the site to collapse. Spoiler, that's kind of what's happening to Stack Overflow at the moment because you can't stop it, right? There is a term for errors for this, and it's called AI hallucinations, and I love this picture. The more I look, so the idea that the AI could be confident that an answer is correct and generate deceptive data. In images, the most common place to see this is to get an AI to generate a hand, because it can often mess it up. It doesn't get the concept that you should only have 5 fingers. For text, hallucinations always mean that you need to double check or have knowledge about what you're asking first, or you could be using some pretty misleading information. So with this in mind, there's always the fear, oh no, there's always the fear that this will make coding or some of your fields redundant, and to me, I disagree. This is because the confidence of wrong answers that I mentioned before, the lack of its ability to do entire projects and instead piecing together smaller parts of a project at a time, the complete inability to take on board client feedback, and finally the need for you to be very good at understanding what the client is asking for and translating it into a good quality prompt all factor into not getting rid of people. Some places have tried it, of course, and have taken a huge reputation hit as well and ran into some other complicated trouble, like the quality of the work that's generating when it's relied too heavily on. So you can see here BuzzFeed fired 180 employees and said, yay, I can use ChatGPT to make my top 10 buzz lists. Yeah, people got grumpy. There's another recent example where AI has caused a bit of a pickle, this time for a sci-fi mag. They were taking short story submissions. Now, the people submitting a story were paid by the word, 12 cents. Cool, eh? They had to close down entries though, as they had an influx of people submitting new stories, a bit more than normal. So and the bit I like here is that they put a picture of like how many people were submitting stories. So the editor of that magazine, Clarkesworld, even showed us. So you can see roughly 15 stories on a busy month compared to 110 in January and then 500 this month. Good luck even reading that in a month. Like your head just sort of explodes, right? So my recommendation with those points about how I feel about it, here's my thoughts on how you should use ChatGPT for yourself. For people stuff, use it as a second or third opinion. What I mean by that is ask it questions that might feel a bit weird to ask as a product owner or someone else. Like, what kind of buffers would you use for time and estimating stuff? How would you schedule your sprint methodologies? Efficient ways to make use of meeting time. Spoiler, quit them. You can get in some really handy info there. For coding, the greatest use I've found for it so far is less writing the code, although that'll probably change, but more talking to it like it's a rubber duck and getting example code from it that I can bend and wrangle, or just get an alternative perspective on how I'm approaching something. And yeah, so briefly, the term rubber ducking, it's an ages-old idea that if you're stuck on something, you talk to a rubber duck or otherwise inanimate object about something that you're trying to do. And by taking a break, stepping away from something and saying what you're doing is a bit of a context break instead of hitting your head on the wall, trying to bash away on the keyboard the whole time. So that's the idea behind that. Let's wrap this up by looking at what's happening in the near future. Again, this has been changing daily, so it's kind of hard to keep up. Microsoft has been throwing heaps and heaps of money. So on the 10th of January, they've thrown $10 billion on top of what's already a big sum that they've been putting into the company. So they're hyper aggressively getting ChatGPT into all of their Office line. Imagine Word, PowerPoint, Outlook all having it. The biggest one is adding ChatGPT to search. Now, quick side note, the launch for Bing to have AI stuff is in March, and they have a waitlist that you can sign up for. To move up in the waitlist, because there's an option to do that, you can run a program on your computer to set Windows apps to be your default program, as well as install other random Microsoft bloatware as well too. It's one of the cheapest schemes I've ever seen, and I've heard a lot from Microsoft from their Internet Explorer days. Anyway, For the Bing redesign, you'll have your search results on the side and ChatGPT on the other side. User testing has found that by having the ChatGPT results, they can get to their answer in a fraction of the time instead of scrolling through Google ads or in recipes about talking about their nan's history before they get to making the thing, which has made Google really, really scared naturally. Google, strangely enough, has been a leader for AI stuff and research for a long time, but I feel they've kind of held off on making it more mainstream, publicizing what they're doing. Like, they know that this will maybe make a huge dip on their advertising revenue, maybe. So they've gone back to their original founders to urgently change things up as fast as possible for fear of losing out to all the other search engines updating how they work. This is huge news, as the founders have kind of been hands-off from Google for many years before this happened. Also, in the near future, there's a saturation of AI-related stuff, a bit like how I mentioned the ChatGPT having the API. So startups and existing companies are throwing everything to jump on the bandwagon. So you've got Snapchat having integrated AI chat so you can make thought-provoking captions that you can chuck on your selfies on the fly. Spotify, this is a US only one at the moment. They have a DJ that you can bring up that'll talk to you and is customized. So, and you can even say, I don't like that song, and it'll change to a different custom playlist and genre. Kind of fun. So if you want to try this out in the quickest way possible, you can totally jump on the ChatGPT blog website, which you can Google and it's easy to jump onto. The catch is that they ask you to sign up with an email and also provide a phone number. So for some people, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's kind of worth it, to be honest. But this site here on this slide, u.com, is an example to get a taste of things because it's free. You can do it straight away. So go to the website, type in a question, and then in the tabs you can click on chat, and that's ChatGPT powered. So you get an idea of like how your search results will change based on doing that kind of thing. So it's a very interesting thing. I've also noticed too in this slide, it's HTTP. It's actually HTTPS. That's bad on my half. Lastly, there are new training models coming out, ChatGPT-4, and their competitor apps coming out in the near future as well. It's easy to forget that most of this didn't really exist 3 months ago. Anyway, that's it. I ran out of time to talk about all these kind of things. They're pretty exciting stuff. How people have broken in very kind of weird ways, the pollution problem, and writing a to-do app with ChatGPT to have your take-home assignment to get yourself a job. Fun stuff. Most talks about AI tend to have a twist at the end, so I thought I'd have a follow-on of that trend. So I used it for this talk's title. I couldn't pass up on a delicious pun. Like, how do you think I went there? I started with amazing progress, but and the incredible journey. That's a good pun too. I think that's cute. But regardless, the one I picked, I definitely rate that an A+. So here's some references for the things I've talked about here. I'll flick this inside the VC channel, or anyone wants to see it as well. And I'm looking at the time and I'm pretty much wrapped up. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brett. This was really great. So many great resources and good overviews of everything and how we can use it. And I love being able to look at both things. Like, here's the good part of it. Here's some things that we need to be aware of and we need to consider. We have maybe a couple of minutes, 2 minutes, if anybody has a question. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. I know there's a lot of information to take in and to think about and lots of resources to explore.
Certainly is. Thanks everyone for listening, by the way. It's always good doing these kind of things. But I think the biggest takeaway I've got from all this is just trying to explore things in different ways and coming up to different takes, like going like, hey, that gardening stuff that I'm doing, maybe I should ask ChatGPT about how I could do that better or differently. There's always new ways to use stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many cool applications. Well, I think that's it for us today. So thanks again, Brett, for being here. If you are watching, feel free to find out more about us at virtualcoffee.io and check out some of the other videos that we have on our channel. Bye.